6 a.m. Steam rises off my coffee as I watch Sarah, my wife, take her chemo pills through the kitchen window. Then, a blonde stranger in a $1,000 outfit storms up my lakefront dock. "You owe $1,500 in HOA fees," she snaps, shoving papers at me. "Plus $300 in late penalties." The coffee turns bitter. "Ma'am, I never joined your HOA." Her laugh grates like nails on a chalkboard. "Pay by Friday or we'll foreclose your property." Normal folks might panic, but after years sniffing out scams, I knew she was bluffing. 3 weeks later, when her fake police report brought cops to my door, her smug face collapsed as I flashed my federal badge. Ever had a power-hungry neighbor try to scam you with fake fees? Share your wildest HOA horror story below and follow for more epic takedowns. My name's Jake Thornfield, and I thought I'd bought the perfect place for my wife to fight cancer in peace. After 20 years investigating financial crimes for the FBI, specifically HOA fraud that destroyed military families across 6 states, I knew exactly what red flags to avoid. 2 acres of Montana lakefront, a 1962 A-frame cabin with grandfather rights older than most HOA laws, and enough legal protection to keep any clipboard-wielding busybody at bay. Sarah, my wife, was 42 with stage 2 breast cancer. Former investigative journalist, still sharp as a tack despite the chemo fog that made her forget simple words sometimes. Our 16-year-old Emma had that Gen Z superpower of documenting everything on TikTok, a habit that would prove crucial later. The property was legally bulletproof. I'd spent 6 months researching every deed, easement, and covenant dating back to 1962. If it wasn't recorded on my title, nobody could touch us, or so I thought. 6 a.m. on a Tuesday. Steam rose off my coffee as I watched Sarah through the kitchen window, her hands slightly shaking as she took her daily chemo pills. The smell of bacon drifted from the stove where she maintained breakfast routines despite everything. Emma was already up, filming the sunrise for her followers. "Dad, this light is absolutely perfect," she whispered, panning across the misty lake water. Then I heard those heels, click, click, click on my wooden dock. Turning, I saw this blonde woman in what looked like a $1,000 lake outfit. Designer everything but trying to look outdoorsy. She clutched a clipboard like a weapon. They always have the clipboard. "Good morning," she announced, like she owned my property. "I'm Dolores Whitman, Lake Community Coordinator. We have serious compliance issues to discuss." My coffee suddenly tasted bitter. "Compliance with what, exactly?" She flipped through papers with practiced authority. "The Crystal Lake Property Association. Your dock violates approved color standards, those pine trees need community-sanctioned trimming, and your cabin shutters aren't regulation dimensions." I set my mug down on the weathered dock railing. "Ma'am, I spent 6 months researching this property. There's no HOA covenant on my deed." Her laugh could have stripped paint off my cabin. "Oh, sweetie, that doesn't matter anymore. State environmental law requires all lakefront properties to join for water protection. Pay your $1,500 in back fees plus $300 in penalties, or we start foreclosure proceedings." The coffee grounds floating in my mug suddenly reminded me of evidence I'd photographed in fraud cases. 20 years hunting financial predators, and I was staring at textbook manipulation tactics. "Foreclosure?" I kept my voice level. "Friday deadline," she smiled, that predator smile. "The community voted unanimously. Either you comply with our standards, or you lose the house." Emma's phone captured every word. Smart kid's instincts were spot on. But here's what really caught my attention. Old Pete Kowalski next door was fishing off his dock like every morning, probably listening to every word. The Hendersons across the cove, retired teachers on fixed income, were watering their garden. Normal people living normal lives in this quiet community of retirees and working families. Exactly the kind of vulnerable targets these scams systematically destroy. "What kind of success have you had with non-cooperative residents?" I asked. "Let's just say property values stay stable when everyone follows the rules." Her tone turned icy. "I'd hate for your wife's medical situation to be complicated by housing instability." She just threatened my sick wife. In front of witnesses. After she left, I sat listening to water lap against the dock pilings, breathing in pine scent and mountain air. Everything we'd specifically chosen for Sarah's peaceful recovery. That evening, I pulled out old FBI case files and started cross-referencing. There she was. Not Dolores Whitman, but Dorothy Wittgenstein. 4 states, 347 victims, $4.2 million in stolen fees using identical tactics. She'd picked the wrong federal agent's family to terrorize. The question was, how many of my neighbors was she already victimizing while I planned her takedown? 2 weeks later, the violation notices started appearing like clockwork. I found the first one tucked under my windshield wiper while replacing a loose dockboard, the smell of cedar shavings mixing with morning lake mist. Official-looking letterhead, legal terminology, and fabricated infractions. Unauthorized dock modifications, $150 fine, unapproved vegetation management, $200, non-conforming structure alterations, $300. Sarah looked over my shoulder as I read it aloud. This is insane, Jake. Can she actually do this? Legally? Hell no. I photographed every page, old FBI habits kicking in. But that's psychological pressure. Emma grabbed the notice, eyes wide. Dad, this looks super official, though. Smart kid. That was the problem. Dolores had invested in quality forgery, embossed letterhead, legal terminology, fake statute citations. Most people would pay rather than fight. But I wasn't most people. That afternoon, I spent 3 hours at the county courthouse with Betty, the weathered clerk who'd worked there since Carter was president. No HOA covenant recorded, she confirmed. Never has been. Your property predates any association formation by decades. Perfect. Official documentation of the fraud. When I got home, Pete Kowalski was waiting in my driveway, looking troubled. At 72, Pete was everyone's favorite neighbor. Retired fisherman, best smoked trout on the lake. Jake, we need to talk. That Whitman woman came by asking questions about your compliance status. Made it sound like you were some kind of troublemaker. The pattern was clear. Dolores wasn't just targeting me, she was building community pressure. Isolate the target, turn neighbors against them, create social consequences. That evening, I followed the money. Using techniques from hunting financial predators, I mapped Dolores's operation. First, I reverse searched her letterhead. The graphics matched templates from a Nevada printing company, the same one used in a 2019 Las Vegas HOA fraud case I'd worked. Then I investigated Dolores herself. Public records showed she owned 0 Crystal Lake property. 0. She was renting a cabin and claiming authority over an entire community. Her social media showed expensive jewelry, luxury vacations, designer clothes, inconsistent with a volunteer coordinator. Emma wandered into my study around 10 p.m., finding me surrounded by documents. The taste of stale coffee lingered under the yellow desk lamp. Want me to check her Instagram? I'm way better at social media stalking than you old people. 10 minutes later, my 16-year-old had uncovered luxury resorts, expensive cars, jewelry costing more than most annual salaries. All funded, I suspected, by fraudulent HOA fees. This reminded me of something crucial from investigating hundreds of property fraud cases. Your deed is your constitutional protection. Everything legally binding on your property must be recorded there with your signature. Real authority shows up on deeds. Fake authority shows up on clipboards. The next morning brought escalation. Dolores arrived with 3 California transplants who didn't understand Montana property law. Mr. Thornfield, she announced loudly, the community has voted. You have 48 hours to pay assessments or face legal action. I smiled and started recording. Could you state your legal authority to collect fees from properties not bound by HOA covenants? Her expression flickered. The community association has full authority. Based on what documentation? What court granted this authority? The 3 neighbors shifted uncomfortably. They'd been told this was legitimate business. Now they heard someone demanding actual legal proof. But Dolores revealed how desperate she'd become. Instead of backing down, she escalated with a move that caught me off guard. Since you're being difficult, we're bringing in the state. That afternoon, she returned with a man claiming to be from Montana Department of Environmental Quality. Official-looking vest, professional testing equipment. Sir, we've received contamination reports from your property. We need immediate soil testing. Cost is $3,500. 20 years of federal training kicked in. While he talked, I studied his equipment. Nevada rental stickers were visible on his testing kit. His clipboard had identical fonts to Dolores's documents. When I asked for his state employee ID, he couldn't provide one. Interesting. I called actual Montana DEQ this morning. They have no record of watershed emergencies, contracted teams, or you. The fake inspector went white. He packed his props while Dolores tried maintaining control. This is preliminary assessment. No, this is fraud. Impersonating state officials is federal crime. Leave before I call real authorities. They fled like tourists spotting grizzly bears. That night, I called Marcus Williams at FBI Financial Crimes. Jake, how's retirement? Retirement found me. I've got organized fraud in my backyard, escalated to impersonating state officials. 20 minutes later, Marcus was silent. This sounds like the Morrison case from Arizona. Same MO, same escalation, same criminal network. What do you need? Everything you've got, and Jake, be careful. When cornered, these people escalate to dangerous territory. As if on cue, footsteps echoed on my dock. Through the window, I saw Dolores placing another notice. This one was different. Bigger, red lettering across the top. Final notice. Lien filing authorization. Her heels clicked away on wooden planks like warning shots. She'd declared war on a federal agent's family. Time to show her what 20 years hunting financial predators taught me about building bulletproof cases. The fake lien hit county records 3 days later. I discovered it checking property taxes online. An additional filing appeared overnight. Crystal Lake Property Association versus Thornfield Property, claiming $2,847 in unpaid assessments and administrative costs. My coffee turned bitter. These bastards had filed fraudulent government paperwork. Sarah found me at the kitchen table, morning sunlight dancing across lake water. The smell of bacon drifted from the stove where she maintained breakfast routines despite everything. "What's wrong?" she asked, settling with her vanilla-scented coffee. "They filed a lien against our house, completely fake, but it's in official records." Her face went pale. "Can they just file lies?" "Unfortunately, yes. County clerks assume people aren't stupid enough to commit fraud on public documents. But filing false liens is federal mail fraud. From previous cases, I knew the psychology. Liens terrify homeowners because they threaten basic security. Most people pay anything to make liens disappear, even fraudulent ones." Emma appeared in pajamas, phone ready. "Dad, Mrs. Henderson posted on Facebook. She's panicking about some lien thing." My stomach dropped. If they'd targeted the Hendersons, retired teachers on Social Security, this was systematic. Emma showed me Margaret Henderson's post. "Does anyone understand this lien notice? We can't afford lawyers and Social Security barely covers medications. Are we losing our house?" I grabbed my jacket. "I'm checking on them." The Hendersons' kitchen table displayed official-looking documents. Harold, 74, had taught math for 40 years, but looked lost facing legal paperwork. "We've never signed anything about an HOA," he said, voice shaking. 23 years here. Their lien demanded $3,200, higher than mine. The psychology was deliberate. Hit elderly people with amounts that feel impossible but aren't quite large enough for lawyers. During my Arizona investigation, I'd seen this pattern destroy seniors who liquidated retirement savings. "Harold, Margaret, these liens are completely fraudulent. You don't owe anything." "But it's filed with the county," Margaret whispered. I showed courthouse photos. "Your deed shows no HOA covenant. We're dealing with organized fraud targeting seniors." Harold's eyes sharpened, recognizing patterns. "Like phone scams?" "Exactly, but more sophisticated." That afternoon, I accessed federal databases. Dorothy Wittgenstein, aka Dolores Whitman, had an established pattern. Nevada, $890,000 stolen. Arizona, $1.2 million. Idaho, $680,000, always targeting lakefront communities, filing fake liens, pressuring elderly residents. She'd made one error, targeting a federal agent specializing in this exact fraud. From my experience with financial predators, I knew something most people don't. Liens can be challenged and removed if they're fraudulent. The key is acting fast and demanding proof of legitimate debt. Most fake liens collapse when someone actually fights back instead of just paying to make problems disappear. The next morning brought bold escalation. I was installing security cameras when 3 vehicles invaded my driveway. Dolores emerged with a man in a cheap suit carrying a briefcase. "Mr. Thornfield, this is attorney Robert Chen from Helena. He's discussing compliance options before foreclosure." I climbed down, setting my drill aside. "Foreclosure based on what authority?" The supposed attorney opened his briefcase theatrically. "The lien filing gives clear authority. However, my client accepts payment plus attorney fees to resolve this. 20 years interrogating criminals taught me to spot amateurs. His legal documents were home printed. His briefcase was Target quality. His suit screamed discount rack. "What's your bar number?" He blinked. "Excuse me?" "Your Montana State Bar registration. I'll verify credentials." Dolores stepped forward. "That's not necessary. Practicing law without license is a felony." I pulled out my phone. 1 minute to verify. Here's where Dolores made her second major tactical error. Instead of cutting losses, she tried intimidating a federal agent. The fake attorney went white, but as they prepared to leave, Dolores played her trump card. "By the way, Mr. Thornfield, we've filed liens against 12 properties. Your neighbors are concerned about property values. I'd hate for community sentiment to turn against uncooperative residents." The threat was clear. comply or face isolation. But she just made a critical mistake. Threatening multiple elderly residents with fake liens wasn't harassment anymore. It was organized racketeering under federal RICO statutes. My countermove was equally devastating. That evening, I called Marcus. Fake liens, fake lawyers, community manipulation. This is organized racketeering with federal implications. Financial Crimes is very interested. Can you wait while we coordinate with U.S. Attorney? Through my window, Henderson house lights glowed, probably lying awake worrying about losing their home. They're terrorizing elderly neighbors. Time's running short. What you're building could shut down their entire network. Suppliers, financial contacts, everyone. Patience saves hundreds of future victims. The smell of pine mixed with distant wood smoke reminded me why we'd chosen this place. Sarah's peaceful recovery was being destroyed by systematic criminals. But now I had federal backing. Tomorrow, the real investigation would begin. By week 4, Dolores had weaponized the entire government against us. Police reports arrived like clockwork, one every other day. Threatening behavior, disturbing the peace, intimidating elderly residents. All fabricated, but each brought Deputy Rodriguez to my door with that apologetic look. "Jake, I'm sorry," Mike said on his third visit, morning mist rising off the lake. I poured coffee on my dock, pine scent mixing with his frustration. "How many reports this week?" 4, all from the same source. Mike shook his head. "But Pete called yesterday, says he's been watching through binoculars. No confrontations, just you working on your property." "Perfect." Dolores was overplaying her hand. From my federal cases, this pattern always exposed criminals through sheer volume. But the real escalation hit at Sarah's oncology appointment. Dr. Morrison's nurse entered looking flustered. "Doctor, we've received concerning calls about Mrs. Thornfield's home situation. Someone claiming to be social services, asking about stress factors affecting treatment." My blood went ice cold. Sarah's grip tightened on my hand. "Questions about domestic instability, financial stress, whether the patient's in a safe environment?" The nurse continued. "I cited patient privacy laws, but they were persistent and knew specific treatment details. That crossed every line. Targeting cancer treatment wasn't harassment. It was assault on a vulnerable person during life-saving care." The next morning brought her masterstroke, Montana Child Protective Services. Emma was getting ready for school when the knock came. I opened the door to a tired social worker with a clipboard. "Mr. Thornfield, Linda Walsh, CPS. We've received reports of domestic instability affecting your minor child's welfare." "Reports from whom?" "Anonymous concerned community members." I let her in. Refusing creates more problems. Emma sat at our kitchen table looking scared. "What specific concerns?" I asked. "Ongoing neighbor conflicts, financial stress from legal disputes, family isolation from community support." Brilliant strategy. Dolores had weaponized every agency touching our lives. Clerks, police, medical providers, child services. Individual reports seemed legitimate, but together painted crisis. "Miss Walsh, I need to show you something." I pulled out my evidence file, photos, recordings, federal printouts. "We're victims of organized fraud being investigated by FBI financial crimes." 20 minutes later, she was documenting harassment of a federal agent's family. "I'll file that no welfare issues exist, but document these attempts for prosecutors." That evening, I found Emma staring at her phone, supposedly doing homework. "Dad, this is getting really scary. Some friends' parents are asking weird questions about our family." Dolores had found the perfect pressure point. Our daughter's social life, Sarah's medical care, our community reputation. Every aspect of normal life under attack. From my experience investigating harassment campaigns, I knew something crucial. Document everything, because harassment patterns prove criminal intent in court. When multiple agencies get suspicious reports about the same family, that's evidence of conspiracy, not coincidence. That night, I transitioned to active investigation. Using money laundering techniques, I mapped Dolores's cash flow. Bank deposits, credit transactions, social media posts about expensive purchases inconsistent with volunteer work. What I found was damning. $15,000 cash deposit 3 weeks ago, $8,500 2 weeks ago, $12,000 last week. Cross-referencing deposit dates with victim payment dates revealed direct money flow from fraud to personal accounts. Federal money laundering case building in real time. Next morning brought desperate escalation. I was drinking coffee when Dolores appeared with 5 people carrying clipboards and cameras. "Mr. Thornfield, this is Crystal Lake Environmental Assessment Team, documenting violations posing water quality risks." They photographed everything: dock, landscaping, trash cans. One man with expensive equipment shot close-ups of my cabin's foundation. What authority do you have? Montana Environmental Protection Act, all lakefront properties subject to inspection. I started recording. Could you provide documentation of your EPA authority? Her team looked nervous. One whispered, "Is this guy a lawyer? Federal agent, retired FBI financial crimes, 2 fake inspectors backed toward vehicles?" But here's where Dolores revealed how cornered she'd become. Instead of retreating, she made her most dangerous mistake. Federal status doesn't exempt environmental compliance. Absolutely right, which is why I called actual Montana Department of Environmental Quality this morning. They have no record of your organization, and they're very interested in meeting you. Her face went white. Fear flickered in her eyes for the first time. That's unnecessary. We'll complete our assessment. They'll be here this afternoon to assess your credentials. As her team fled, I realized she'd made her first major error, impersonating state officials, a federal crime adding years to her sentence. More importantly, she was panicking. Panicked criminals make fatal mistakes. That evening, Marcus called. "Jake, we've got full federal authorization, multi-state task force, asset seizure authority. How soon can you have evidence ready?" I looked at Crystal Lake's peaceful evening light, then at documentation covering my table. "Been ready for weeks. How fast can you move?" "Arrest warrant 72 hours, asset seizure 48. We're shutting this down hard. Finally." Federal justice was coming to Crystal Lake. The only question was whether Dolores would run or fight when her criminal empire collapsed. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. Time to stop playing defense and reveal exactly who Dolores had been messing with. I pulled out my federal case files and spread them across the dining table like battle plans. The smell of old paper mixed with Sarah's chamomile tea as she found me there at midnight, surrounded by evidence and memories. "Jake, you need to tell me everything," she said, settling beside me. Steam rose between us like ghosts of old cases. So I did. 20 years investigating financial crimes for the FBI, specializing in HOA and property management fraud. I'd led successful prosecutions that recovered $47 million for victims across 12 states. Congressional testimony on fraud patterns, expert witness in landmark cases that set federal precedent. "This isn't just about us anymore," I said, showing her the pattern analysis I'd been building. "Dolores, Dorothy Wittgenstein, has run this exact scheme in 4 states. 347 families defrauded, $4.2 million stolen over 8 years. Emma appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Dad, why are you guys up so late?" "Come here, kiddo." I gestured to evidence covering our table. "Remember how you've been filming everything? Turns out you've been building a federal case." For the next hour, I walked my family through what we were actually facing. This wasn't neighborhood drama with an overzealous HOA president. This was organized crime, sophisticated fraud network with shell companies, fake contractors, corrupt officials, political connections. The fake environmental team yesterday? That was panic, I explained. When criminals feel cornered, they make desperate choices. Impersonating state officials adds 5 to 10 years to her sentence. Sarah's journalist instincts kicked in. What's her endgame? Why target lakefront specifically? I pulled up land development plans buried in county records. Property acquisition through distress sales. Harass families until they sell below market, then development partners swoop in for luxury resort construction. That's evil brilliant, Emma said. But how did you figure this out? Professional pattern recognition, plus something she doesn't know. I've been coordinating with my former FBI unit for 2 weeks. Surveillance, financial analysis, multi-state victim coordination, everything for federal RICO prosecution. The scope was staggering. Shell companies in Delaware and Nevada, fake contractor networks across 4 states, political corruption involving county officials and state legislators, development corporations planning luxury resorts on stolen land. From my experience building federal cases, I'd learned something crucial. Organized fraud always leaves financial fingerprints that lead back to the source. Every fake fee, every fraudulent lien, every stolen dollar creates a paper trail that federal prosecutors can follow straight to criminal bank accounts. "Jake," Sarah said quietly, "this could destroy dozens of families if you don't stop it." "I know. That's why I can't just protect our property and walk away. Every family she targets after us is partially my responsibility if I have the power to stop her." From federal database research, I'd mapped her entire criminal timeline. The pattern was accelerating. Each location brought bigger theft, more sophisticated schemes, higher victim counts. Montana was supposed to be her biggest score yet. But she'd made one fatal error in target selection. She'd threatened a federal agent's family. "So what happens now?" Emma asked. I looked at my wife fighting cancer, my daughter building evidence with TikTok videos, and the comprehensive federal case file covering our table. Now we finish the case. Federal task force operational in 48 hours. Multi-agency coordination across 4 states. Asset seizure to recover stolen money for victims. And Dolores Whitman learns what happens when you target the wrong family. Sarah reached across and took my hand. "You know this means your retirement is officially over." I squeezed back, thinking about the Hendersons lying awake worrying about losing their home, about Pete loading fishing gear for another morning, about innocent families in Dolores's crosshairs. Maybe retirement was never the point. Maybe this is what I was supposed to be doing, using 20 years of federal expertise to protect communities from exactly this kind of predator. Emma grinned. "Plus, my TikTok about catching a federal criminal is going to be absolutely viral." Outside our windows, Crystal Lake reflected moonlight like scattered diamonds. Peaceful, beautiful, worth protecting. The sound of a loon calling across the water reminded me why we'd chosen this place, but now it represented something bigger, a community worth defending against organized crime. Tomorrow, the federal investigation would shift into high gear. But tonight, for the first time in weeks, I felt like we had the upper hand. Dolores had been hunting what she thought was a vulnerable family in a quiet mountain community. Instead, she'd cornered a federal agent with nothing left to lose and everything needed to destroy her criminal empire. Time to show her what 20 years of federal training could do when someone threatened the wrong family. The next morning, my phone started ringing at 6 a.m., federal coordination in motion. "Jake, it's Marcus. We've got green lights across the board. FBI Financial Crimes taking lead, coordinating with U.S. Attorney in Helena, Montana State AG, and local law enforcement. This is going to be textbook multi-jurisdictional takedown." I sat on my dock with coffee, watching sunrise paint the lake golden, while federal justice machinery kicked into high gear. The smell of pine mixed with anticipation and the distant sound of trucks staging at the community center. What's the timeline? 72 hours to coordinated arrests. We're hitting her entire network simultaneously. Montana, Nevada, Arizona, Idaho. Can't let anyone slip away or destroy evidence. While Marcus assembled the federal task force, I had my own community protection to handle. First priority, Pete Kowalski. I found him at his usual morning fishing spot, casting into the mist. "Pete, we need to talk, privately." 20 minutes later, I'd walked him through the entire federal case. His weathered fisherman facade melted away, revealing sharp intelligence underneath. "Jake, I haven't been completely honest either," he said quietly. "I'm not just a retired fisherman. 25 years as Montana State Attorney General before I moved to the lake." My jaw dropped. "You're Pete Kowalski? The Pete Kowalski who prosecuted the Glacier National Park corruption case?" He grinned. "Guilty. Been watching Dolores's operation for weeks, building my own case file. When you showed up with federal credentials, I figured we should coordinate efforts." Perfect. Federal backing plus state-level legal expertise. Next, I visited the Hendersons with good news and protection protocols. "Harold, Margaret, those liens are about to disappear permanently. Federal agents will be seizing all fraudulent documents and freezing accounts. Every penny stolen gets returned through restitution." Margaret started crying with relief. We were about to cash out our savings. Don't pay anything. Here's something crucial from investigating these scams. When federal agents seize criminal assets, victims automatically get money back through court-ordered restitution. The system makes criminals pay, not victims. That afternoon, Sarah coordinated with journalism colleagues while I worked with federal evidence teams. Emma had become our unofficial digital forensics specialist, organizing social media evidence into professional presentations. "Dad, I've been thinking," she said, looking up from her laptop. "What if we live-streamed the aftermath, show people how federal law enforcement protects communities?" Smart Kid was already planning viral content to educate future victims. The federal preparation was methodical and overwhelming. Financial crimes agents analyzed shell company structures. Cyber specialists traced digital communications across state lines. Asset recovery teams identified properties and accounts for seizure. But the most satisfying part was victim coordination. Marcus called with hourly updates. "Jake, we've got 43 families ready to testify. Arizona victims alone represent 1.2 million in losses. Adding Montana, Nevada, Idaho, we're looking at federal sentences in decades." What about political corruption? Beautiful part. Nevada County Inspector took $50,000 in bribes. Arizona State Legislator accepted campaign contributions for blocking HOA reform. We're not just getting Dolores, we're cleaning house. Evening brought final coordination. I sat in my study, laptop connected to encrypted federal channels, coordinating with agents in 4 states. The scope was staggering. Simultaneous raids on 15 locations. Asset seizure targeting 8 shell companies. Arrest warrants for 12 individuals, including Dolores, her brother-in-law, 2 county officials, and a state legislator. Jake, Marcus's voice crackled through secure communication. This case will make federal law enforcement history. First successful RICO prosecution of organized HOA fraud. Congressional testimony guaranteed. You'll be the face of community protection against property crime. Through my window, I could see lights in houses around the lake, families enjoying evening routines, unaware that federal agents were positioning for the largest property fraud bust in Montana history. The taste of Sarah's homemade soup reminded me why we'd chosen this quiet life. Tomorrow, we'd finally have it. Sarah found me staring out at peaceful water. Nervous? She asked. Not nervous. Determined. Tomorrow, every family Dolores terrorized gets justice. Every elderly couple threatened gets money back. Every community targeted gets protected. And us? I pulled her close, breathing the familiar scent of her shampoo mixed with lake air. Us? We finally get our peaceful retirement. Emma appeared with her phone, as always. Dad, federal agents are staging at the community center. Should I start filming? Not yet, kiddo. Tomorrow morning, when justice comes to Crystal Lake, then you document history. Outside, I could hear gentle water lapping against dock pilings, the same sound I'd listened to for weeks while building this case. Tomorrow, it would soundtrack Dolores' arrest. Everything was positioned. Federal task force operational, victim testimonies coordinated, evidence packages complete, asset seizure authorized. After 4 weeks of systematic harassment, psychological warfare, and escalating criminal behavior, Dolores Whitman was about to learn what happens when you threaten a federal agent's family. The predator was about to become prey, and Crystal Lake was about to get the justice it deserved. Dawn brought Dolores' most desperate gambit yet. I was installing the final security camera when her convoy pulled up, not 3 vehicles this time, but 7. She emerged from the lead SUV like a general preparing for war, followed by an army of clipboard warriors and what appeared to be actual news cameras. "Mr. Thornfield," she shouted, loud enough to wake the entire lake community, "this is your final opportunity to resolve this matter before we involve federal authorities." The irony was so thick I could taste it, like the morning mist rolling off the water. Behind her stood a mix of faces I recognized and strangers I didn't. The California transplants who'd supported her fake HOA vote. Several people in official-looking vests carrying surveying equipment. A woman with a professional camera filming everything. But here's what caught my federal-trained eye. 2 men in the back wearing poorly fitted suits, trying too hard to look like legitimate authority figures. "What federal authorities?" I asked pleasantly, continuing to adjust my camera angle. Every word was being recorded by multiple devices now. "Environmental Protection Agency, Department of Natural Resources, Montana State Building Inspection," she rattled off with practiced confidence. "Your property has been flagged for immediate compliance review." The fake officials stepped forward on cue. One pulled out an official-looking badge that probably cost $50 on the internet. "Sir, I'm Inspector Williams from EPA Region 8. We've received multiple reports of environmental violations requiring immediate remediation. 20 years of interrogating white-collar criminals had taught me to spot tells." This guy's badge was plastic. His official paperwork was printed on home computer paper. Most damning, he kept glancing at Dolores for approval instead of acting with independent authority. "Inspector Williams, what's your EPA employee identification number?" He blinked rapidly. That's not necessary for field inspections." "Actually, it absolutely is. EPA agents are required to provide identification numbers upon request. It's federal law." While he stammered, I noticed movement in my peripheral vision. Sarah was filming from our kitchen window. Emma had her phone out, live streaming to her TikTok followers. Even Pete was on his dock with what looked suspiciously like professional recording equipment. The second fake official jumped in. "Mr. Thornfield, I'm from Montana Department of Natural Resources. Your lakefront modifications require immediate environmental impact assessment." I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd memorized yesterday. "Hi, this is Jake Thornfield at Crystal Lake. I've got 2 men here claiming to be from EPA and Montana DNR. Could you verify their credentials?" The effect was immediate. Both fake officials started backing toward their vehicles, but Dolores wasn't finished. In fact, she was about to make the most dangerous mistake of her criminal career. Mr. Thornfield, you're obstructing federal officials in the performance of their duties. That's a serious crime. You're absolutely right, I agreed. Obstructing federal officials is a serious crime. So is impersonating them. That's when she revealed just how cornered and desperate she'd become. Instead of retreating, she doubled down with a move that shocked even me. Fine, if you want to play games, we'll play games. She gestured to the woman with the camera. Channel 7 News is here to document how one uncooperative resident is destroying property values and endangering the environment for an entire community. The news camera swung toward me. A reporter with perfect hair and a plastic smile stepped forward. Mr. Thornfield, I'm Jessica Martinez from KRTV Great Falls. Can you comment on allegations that you're refusing to comply with environmental protection requirements? Here's where Dolores made her fatal error. She'd brought legitimate media to document what she thought would be my humiliation. Instead, she'd provided witnesses to her own criminal impersonation of federal officials. Miss Martinez, I'd be happy to comment, I said, looking directly into the camera. But first, let me ask these gentlemen to show their federal credentials to you and your viewers. The panic was immediate and visible. The fake EPA inspector was already at his vehicle. The fake DNR official was frantically gathering his props. Wait, the reporter called out, professional instincts kicking in. Are you saying these aren't real federal agents? That's exactly what I'm saying. And I should know. I'm retired FBI Financial Crimes Division, and I've been investigating Miss Whitman's organized fraud operation for 4 weeks. The news camera swung back to Dolores, who had gone white as fresh snow. Miss Whitman, can you respond to allegations of fraud? But Dolores had made one more critical error. In her desperation to pressure me, she'd brought too many people, made too much noise, attracted too much attention, because federal agents had been positioning all morning. As if on cue, I heard the sound of multiple vehicles approaching fast. Not Dolores's amateur convoy, professional law enforcement with serious intent. Miss Martinez, I said to the news camera, you're about to witness the largest property fraud bust in Montana history. Dolores looked around frantically as federal agents emerged from unmarked vehicles surrounding her entire operation. FBI, nobody move, hands where we can see them. The fake officials tried to run. The California transplants looked confused and terrified. The news crew kept filming, realizing they'd stumbled onto the story of their careers. And Dolores Whitman, aka Dorothy Wittgenstein, finally understood that her 4-state criminal empire was about to come crashing down around her. The predator had become the prey. The community meeting Dolores scheduled for that evening was supposed to be her victory lap. Instead, it became the stage for her spectacular downfall. By 6 p.m., the Crystal Lake Community Center was packed beyond capacity. Folding chairs filled every available space, with people standing along the walls. The smell of coffee and nervous sweat filled the air as neighbors who'd been terrorized for weeks finally gathered to confront their tormentor. But Dolores had stacked the deck. The front rows were filled with her supporters. The California transplants, a few intimidated locals, and several faces I didn't recognize who were probably part of her criminal network. She'd even arranged for the local cable access channel to broadcast live, thinking she'd document my public humiliation for posterity. What she didn't know was that federal agents were positioned throughout the crowd, and my family had coordinated our own documentation strategy. Ladies and gentlemen, Dolores began, standing at a podium with her ever-present clipboard, we're here tonight to address the ongoing disruption to our peaceful community caused by certain uncooperative residents. The projector screen behind her displayed what appeared to be official documents, charts showing declining property values, and photographs of my property with alleged violations circled in red. Mr. Jake Thornfield has consistently refused to comply with legitimate community standards, ignored environmental protection requirements, and shown complete disregard for property values and neighborhood safety. A murmur ran through the crowd. I could see the Hendersons sitting near the back, holding hands nervously. Pete was in his usual flannel shirt, looking every inch the simple fisherman while recording everything with concealed federal equipment. Tonight, we're going to resolve this matter once and for all, Dolores continued. The community will vote on enforcement measures, including immediate lien placement and potential legal action. That's when she made her most dangerous psychological play. But first, let's hear from Mr. Thornfield himself. Perhaps he'd like to explain to his neighbors why he thinks he's above the rules that protect everyone's investments. The crowd turned toward me expectantly. Some faces showed curiosity, others hostility, many just confusion. These were good people who'd been systematically manipulated by a professional criminal. I stood slowly, feeling the weight of federal credentials in my jacket pocket and the eyes of hidden agents throughout the room. "Thank you, Miss Whitman," or should I say, Miss Wittgenstein? The effect was immediate. Her confident smile flickered. Several of her supporters shifted uncomfortably. "I'm not sure what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts." I pulled out my phone and connected it to the room's projection system. For the past 4 weeks, this community has been under attack by an organized criminal enterprise. The screen behind Dolores lit up with federal case files, financial evidence, and multi-state victim testimonies. Dorothy Wittgenstein, operating under the alias Dolores Whitman, has defrauded 347 families across 4 states using identical tactics to what you've experienced here. The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs. Dolores tried to regain control. "This is ridiculous. I'm a respected community leader trying to protect property values." "You're a federal fugitive," I interrupted. "And I should know, because I'm the FBI agent who's been building the case against you." Here's where Dolores revealed just how dangerous and desperate she'd become. Instead of retreating or trying to flee, she made one final catastrophic mistake. "You're lying," she screamed, her composed facade finally cracking completely. "Everyone in this room knows you're just a troublemaker trying to avoid paying legitimate fees. Security, remove this man." 2 large men I'd never seen before started moving toward me from the sides of the room. Not community members, hired muscle she'd brought as insurance. But Dolores had made a critical error. Threatening a federal agent in front of 50 witnesses while being broadcast live on local television was about to trigger the full weight of federal law enforcement. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said calmly into the sudden tension, "you're about to witness something historic." I reached into my jacket pocket, not for a weapon, but for the credentials I'd carried for 20 years. The federal badge caught the overhead fluorescent lights as I held it high enough for everyone to see, including the cable TV cameras broadcasting live across the county. "Federal Bureau of Investigation, Financial Crimes Division, Dorothy Wittgenstein, you're under arrest for conspiracy, mail fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, and racketeering." The silence was deafening. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of vehicles approaching fast. Dolores's face went through a spectrum of emotions: shock, denial, rage, and finally pure terror as she realized her 4-state criminal empire was collapsing in real time on live television. "That's impossible," she whispered. "You're just a retiree. You can't be—" "Ma'am, I've been investigating organized fraud for 20 years. You picked the wrong federal agent's family to terrorize." The community center doors burst open as federal agents flooded in, badges visible, weapons drawn but pointed safely down. "FBI, everyone remain calm and stay seated." The live cable broadcast captured every moment as Agent Marcus Williams approached Dolores with handcuffs. "Dorothy Wittgenstein, you're under arrest. You have the right to remain silent." As Miranda rights echoed through the packed community center, I looked around at my neighbors' faces. Shock was giving way to understanding, fear transforming into relief. The Hendersons were crying. Pete was grinning like he'd just caught the biggest fish in Montana. Emma was live streaming to what had to be thousands of viewers by now. And Dolores Whitman, the woman who terrorized our peaceful community for weeks, was finally in federal custody where she belonged. Justice had come to Crystal Lake. The moment had arrived. 50-plus neighbors packed into folding chairs, cable TV cameras rolling live, and Dolores Whitman standing at the podium with her final ultimatum. "Mr. Thornfield," she announced with theatrical authority, "you will pay these assessments immediately, or the sheriff will seize your property tomorrow morning." The community center fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the nervous shuffle of feet, elderly neighbors visibly shaking in their seats, the Hendersons clutching each other's hands, Pete sitting calmly in his flannel shirt, looking like a simple fisherman while federal recording equipment captured every word. The local news crew focused their camera on me, expecting to document a defeated homeowner's surrender to community pressure. Instead, they were about to witness federal justice in action. I stood slowly, feeling the weight of my credentials in my jacket pocket and the eyes of hidden federal agents positioned throughout the crowd. "Miss Whitman," I said clearly, my voice carrying across the packed room, "before we proceed, I think this community deserves to know exactly who you really are. Her confident smile flickered for just a moment before returning full force. I'm a respected community leader protecting property values. No, I interrupted, pulling out my phone and connecting to the room's projection system. You're Dorothy Wittgenstein, a federal fugitive who's defrauded 347 families across 4 states using identical tactics. The screen behind her lit up with FBI case files, financial evidence, and victim testimonies. The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs. "This is ridiculous," Dolores screeched, her composed facade cracking. "Everyone knows you're just a troublemaker avoiding legitimate fees." That's when she made her final fatal mistake. "Security," she shouted. "Remove this man from the meeting." 2 large men I'd never seen before started moving toward me from opposite sides of the room. Not community members. Hired muscle she'd brought as insurance. But threatening a federal agent in front of 50 witnesses while being broadcast live on local television was about to trigger the full weight of federal law enforcement. The moment of truth had arrived. I reached slowly into my jacket pocket, not for a weapon, but for the credentials I'd carried proudly for 20 years. The federal badge caught the overhead fluorescent lights as I held it high enough for everyone to see, including the cable TV cameras broadcasting live across Montana. Federal Bureau of Investigation, Financial Crimes Division. The silence was absolute. You could hear individual heartbeats, the distant hum of the building's air conditioning, the faint sound of vehicles approaching fast outside. "Dorothy Wittgenstein," I continued, my voice carrying the full authority of federal law enforcement, "you're under arrest for conspiracy, mail fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, and operating a criminal enterprise under the RICO Act." Dolores's face went through a kaleidoscope of emotions: shock, denial, rage, and finally pure terror, as she realized her 4-state criminal empire was collapsing in real time on live television. "That's impossible," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You're just a retiree. You can't be federal—" "Ma'am, I've been investigating organized fraud for 20 years, and you just made the biggest mistake of your criminal career. You threatened a federal agent's family." The community center doors burst open with military precision as federal agents flooded in, badges clearly visible, moving with the coordinated efficiency of a practiced takedown team. "FBI, everyone remain calm and stay in your seats." Agent Marcus Williams approached Dolores with handcuffs while she stood frozen in disbelief. "Dorothy Wittgenstein, also known as Dolores Whitman, you're under arrest for federal crimes spanning 4 states. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The live cable broadcast captured every moment as Miranda rights echoed through the packed community center. Federal agents began systematically arresting her hired muscle, the fake contractors, and several others who'd been part of her criminal network. But the moment that would go viral on Emma's TikTok came when Dolores, finally realizing the scope of her defeat, looked directly at me with pure hatred. "You destroyed everything," she screamed as federal agents restrained her. "I had the perfect operation." I looked her straight in the eye and delivered the line that would be quoted in congressional hearings about organized fraud. "Ma'am, the only thing you got right is that I'm an outsider. I'm outside your criminal network. This community is under federal protection now, and your reign of terror is officially over." The applause started slowly, first from Margaret Henderson, then Harold, then Pete, then spreading throughout the room like a wave of relief and vindication. Even the news crew was clapping as they filmed. As federal agents led Dolores away in handcuffs, she made one last desperate attempt to maintain her false authority. "This isn't over. I have rights. I have political connections." Agent Williams paused at the door. "Ma'am, your political connections are being arrested simultaneously in Nevada and Arizona as we speak. Your criminal enterprise is finished." The community center erupted in cheers as the woman who terrorized dozens of families was finally led away to face federal justice. I looked around at the faces of my neighbors, no longer afraid, no longer confused, no longer victims. The Hendersons were crying tears of relief. Pete was grinning like he'd just landed the biggest fish in Montana. Emma was live streaming to thousands of viewers, documenting the moment justice came to Crystal Lake. And somewhere in the crowd, I caught Sarah's eye. She mouthed 2 words that made everything worthwhile: "Welcome home." After weeks of systematic harassment, psychological warfare, and escalating criminal threats, Crystal Lake was finally free. The predator had become the prey, and federal justice had protected our community. 6 months later, Crystal Lake had transformed into something beautiful. The federal prosecution moved with devastating efficiency. Dorothy Wittgenstein received 12 years in federal prison plus full restitution. Her brother-in-law got 5 years. The corrupt county official faced 8 years for accepting bribes. The entire criminal network across 4 states was systematically dismantled. Most importantly, every stolen dollar was recovered. Federal asset seizure returned $4.2 million to 347 families. The Hendersons got their $3,200 back plus damages. Every fraudulent lien was permanently voided, every fake assessment was canceled. But the real victory was what happened to our community. I sat on my dock this morning, coffee steaming in crisp mountain air, watching Pete cast his line into water reflecting sunrise like scattered diamonds. The smell of pine mixed with wood smoke, exactly the peaceful retirement we'd planned, but somehow even better. Sarah's cancer treatment had been remarkably successful. Her oncologist said stress reduction after Dolores's arrest measurably improved her therapy response. She was now in remission, back to her sharp journalist self, writing a book about organized fraud and community protection. Emma's TikTok video of the arrest exploded. 2.3 million views and counting. More importantly, her educational series about recognizing fraud tactics helped 12 other communities identify similar schemes. My 16-year-old had become an unlikely advocate for senior citizen protection. Without Dolores's artificial fear and manipulation, neighbors rediscovered genuine community spirit. Margaret Henderson knocked on my door yesterday with a proposal that made my heart swell. Jake, we want to create something positive from this experience, a real community organization focused on protection and education. What emerged was the Crystal Lake Conservation Initiative, a legitimate voluntary association dedicated to environmental protection, senior safety, and fraud prevention education. Not a fake HOA demanding fees, but genuine community partnership preserving what made our lake special. The initiative's first project was a scholarship program for students studying environmental science or criminal justice. Funded entirely by voluntary donations. No mandatory fees, no threats, no intimidation. We established community education programs teaching property rights, fraud recognition, and verifying legitimate authority. 6 other Montana communities adopted our program. The FBI Academy was studying it for national implementation. Property values genuinely improved without artificial manipulation. Families chose Crystal Lake specifically because of our reputation as a fraud-resistant community protecting residents. After Dolores's sentencing, Congressman Williams called requesting testimony about organized HOA fraud before the House Financial Services Committee. 3 months later, I was in Washington, D.C., explaining how federal law enforcement could better protect communities from property fraud. The Crystal Lake case became the model for new federal legislation requiring HOA verification and stronger penalties for organized property crimes. But my favorite moment happened at our first annual Crystal Lake Community Festival, a celebration raising $23,000 for environmental protection and senior safety programs. Margaret Henderson pulled me aside, tears in her eyes. Jake, when Dolores threatened our house, we felt helpless. But watching you fight back gave us hope that good people still protect each other. She looked at families enjoying lakeside picnics, children playing safely, elderly neighbors chatting without fear. You didn't just save our money, you saved our faith and community. That evening, as neighbors spontaneously organized cleanup teams, I realized something profound. My law enforcement career hadn't ended. It had evolved into something more meaningful. Using federal expertise to protect communities wasn't just a former job, it was a lifelong calling. Sarah found me on our dock as sunset painted the lake in brilliant orange and gold. "Any regrets about the quiet retirement we planned?" she asked. I pulled her close, listening to water lapping against pilings, breathing pine scent mixed with satisfaction of justice served. Not a single regret. This is exactly where we're supposed to be. Through our windows, Emma edited her latest educational video. Across the lake, Pete tied fishing flies. The Hendersons read on their porch, no longer fearing criminals. Crystal Lake had become what we'd hoped, a place where families live in peace, protected by authentic community spirit and knowledge that good people fight for what's right. If you've ever dealt with HOA harassment or property fraud, drop a comment sharing your experience. Let's help each other recognize red flags before they become federal cases. And smash that subscribe button for more stories about ordinary people taking down corruption and protecting their communities. Sometimes meaningful retirement isn't about escaping responsibility. It's about using hard-earned experience to protect the people and places you've learned to cherish most.